All right, we are live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chris, and this is Bar 911-970. I really felt the need to make this video, and I think just every now and then when I get inspired, I'll make a video, and I'll leave it that way. As much as I would love to just walk away from all this stuff, I feel like if my messages aren't being heard by those who care, then I am basically having corrupt people win by silencing us through our own servitude, so to speak. So I want to talk about something that's going to be very important, and it's going to hit people emotionally, but I want you to just shut off the emotion for the moment and just listen logically and then draw your conclusions from there. Because one of the easiest ways to control people, and I think people are starting to see this more and more nowadays, is through their emotions. Because when you use your emotions, you eliminate your reasoning and your logic, and you go based on what you're feeling at that moment. And that means you're going to react more than you are going to study, research, learn, and interact. So bear that in mind. So this video is based on something that inspired me. I was watching the most recent video from Owen Benjamin. If you don't know who he is, he's a comedian that basically is tired of all the Hollywood lies and is kind of partially given up his fame and fortune and his livelihood to speak the truth. And I have a lot of respect for him because he is basically no nonsense, and I like that. Takes a lot of guts to go against the Hollywood, money, fortune, fame, and silence because of it. But there's something he talked about that inspired me to make this video that I think even he might not be aware of. And that is the word God. And you'll see I put that word in quotes. And I haven't talked about this in a while. I want people to understand, or what I like to say, understand, that the word God, people misunderstand and make a lot of assumptions. And this could be easily manipulated. And I'll give you a couple of examples to prove this fact. Because the word God, people assume that it's the image that you may see on the screen. That it's the Creator, the Father. Well, God is not a name, it's a title. Prime example, there are many gods. I mean, if you worship Buddha, then Buddha would be your God. If you are a Satan worshiper, then Satan would be your God. If you worshipped some mystic elf, that mystic elf would be your God. So the word God, people assume, is the one that you are hoping it is. And I can show you how easily you can be manipulated and tricked into having your own free will make the wrong choice. Now, Benjamin Owen, like I talked about in the beginning, was talking in his video recently, it was just made last night, about a story in the Bible, and there's many stories about this, where people demand sacrifices, where supposedly, quote-unquote, God asks people to kill even their own children as a sacrifice to God. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. If it was the one true Creator, why would a loving Creator ask somebody to commit the very sin that is told about in the Bible in the Ten Commandments? Thou shalt not kill. And thank you, Nicholas. I appreciate that. I want you to really think about that. One of the 10 Commandments is thou shalt not commit murder, or thou shalt not kill. And yet you see throughout the Bible times where a quote-unquote God says, for example, kill your brother or kill your son to appease me. Now I want you to think about that for a second. Who do you think most likely would be that particular quote-unquote God in those situations? Would it be A, the loving God who created those very people that that person is asking to have murdered in his name, or a deceitful trickster who is convincing you with your own free will to go against the very commandment that said God supposedly created. So think about that. If a creature came out of the sky and said, I am the one true God, and I demand that you kill your child, do you think that is the real creator? Because if that was the real creator that created that child that you have now been commanded to murder, isn't that going against the very reason of the creation in the first place? So basically that's saying God made a mistake, so kill it. Or you could look at it as ego. Now, do you think the loving, creating, all-forgiving creator, Father, God, that God, would demand a sacrifice to show your loyalty, to show your love? Or do you think that's somebody who uses ego to trick you? Because remember, one of the things that we've been given is free will. But that doesn't mean we cannot be tricked or coerced. Now, I want you to think about this as far as the image you see on the screen. You see a dollar bill. Now, the word on the back of the dollar bill, right above the number 1, is the phrase, "In God we trust." Now again, base it on what I just said, that God is not a name, it's a title. Anybody can use the word God. So let's go by what's on the dollar bill. Go by the symbolism, because that will back up which God they are referring to, instead of you assuming based on what other people tell you. So now, if you get the chance, I want you to get a dollar bill out of your wallet or your pocketbook or wherever, and I want you to look at it. Now, if it was the God that you thought, you would probably see maybe a cross or two. Maybe you'd see an image of Jesus. Maybe you'd see God himself. Maybe you'd see angels. Something that would let you know what they are really believing in. Because remember, there's a reason there's the word lie in the middle of believe. But you don't see any of that on the dollar, do you? Now, if you've ever read the Bible at all, and this is not about being religious, it's about reading beyond the literal words. There's a story in there where Jesus, the only time he ever gets violent is when he sees the money changers in the temple using what they call usury, which is what banks use today, charging interest for money. It's called usury. It's actually the one time where Jesus in the Bible gets violent. Haven't you heard the expression that money is the root of all evil? So let's get back to the dollar. What symbols do you see? Well, I didn't show the whole image, but look at the dollar, and you'll see the pyramid with a single eye on top of it. You'll see on the right side an eagle with a group of stars that when you draw a line through them create a pentagram. And the number 13 is prevalent all over the dollar. You have 13 steps on the pyramid. You have 13 stars, 13 stripes. The eagle is holding 13 arrows in one claw, 13 leaves on the fig branch, and his tail, I mean, there's exceptions with that because there are different prints, but there are on average 13 feathers on his tail. There's also a small owl that's imprinted in one of the corners of the bill that you need a magnifying glass for. So if you base things, because throughout history, the average person could not read and write. Kings and queens sometimes did not have the advantage of reading and writing. Who spread most of the information throughout his story or history? Well, that was the religious people, the church. They passed down most of the written word. So how did the average person who couldn't read and write understand things like laws or things they needed to know about? Well, they used a lot of symbolism. Now, symbolism is still used to this day, but it's not clearly as recognized because no one talks about it. No media will talk about it, no school will teach it, no government will preach it. Out of All right, I guess I must have hit a nerve because it it's funny. I have two channels. I have a comic book channel and I have this channel. Never once on my comic book live feed does it ever get disrupted, but coincidentally enough, on this channel, it gets disrupted all the time. So sorry about that. Totally lost my train of thought, so if anybody could remind me of where I was talking, I can continue. But my point is, we've been given free will. That free will can be easily tricked and manipulated. And you have to think beyond what you're told. So, base things on... Oh, okay, I remember. I was talking about symbolism. So how you teach people throughout history who couldn't read laws and things like that through symbolism. But that art has been lost to this day by the average person, but it doesn't mean symbols are not still being used. By their deeds you shall know them. And we're finding out more and more that the things we've been told to believe are not as they seem. And more people are awakening to this truth. And when it comes to truth, you can never make it disappear, but you can hide it very well. Because remember, free will means you can do the right thing, the wrong thing, or nothing. So just look at the symbols on your money, which, by the way, like I've said, is supposed to be the root of all evil. Whether you live or die is now based upon the fact of how many $1 bills you have in your bank account or in your wallet. So if you can't afford to get medicine to make yourself better, or you cannot afford a roof over your head, or you cannot afford to buy that item of food to survive, you could end up have a very hard life, which means those who make the money are in control of people's lives through the influence of the power that they have placed in that dollar. Why do you think politicians, media, Hollywood, banks, corporations, why do you think they're all so wealthy? Because then they have control over those who are in need. Any reason why you don't think governments, even in this country, are giving out so much quote-unquote welfare, and you view it as charity? When some of these people have enough money to feed the world 1,000,000 times over, and yet they still try and steal as much as they can from you? So look at the symbolism on the dollar bill, like I mentioned. It says, "In God we trust," but there is nothing spiritual about the images that you see. So which God are they referring to? Just like if you take the story, one of the stories in the Bible, where I don't remember the name of the person because it's basically irrelevant, but supposedly God tells this man to climb a mountain and sacrifice his son for the name of God. Now ask yourself, is that the loving God that created that child? Because then that would suggest that God made a mistake and is asking somebody to commit murder, which is supposedly a sin, to erase that for loyalty. Because if you remember another person who wants to be God, aka Satan, and I'm not saying he exists, I'm just basing it on the story, well, wouldn't that person require ego sacrifice to make you volunteer your servitude to commit a sin against the one true God, pretending to be God? Isn't that ego? Isn't that arrogance? But notice how the quote-unquote God didn't force him to kill the child. He just said, "I am God, kill him in my name." And that person did it without question, which means he volunteered his servitude. He used his free will to do the wrong thing. So that person pretending to be the one true creator, the one true father, manipulated that person by saying, "I am something you need to believe. Trust me." If I told you to jump off a bridge, whether I believed it was a fun experience or was purposely lying to you, who feels the effects of your choice, me or you? Now, I could have been completely lying and deceived you, but if you chose to believe me and you jump off that bridge, now I might feel bad, I might regret that decision, but you're the one that's dead, or at the very least extremely injured. It is very easy to manipulate people because all you have to do is put on a suit and tie or have an image like this image of a quote-unquote God that appears out of nowhere and says, "Hi, I'm the Almighty. I want you to kill someone." Doesn't that go against what you're supposed to do as a living creature, is to preserve life, not take it? So how many people would question that command as authentic, as genuine, as from the real deal or the real God? Because remember, again, I'm not saying Satan is a real thing, but the message is, isn't he the great deceiver? He's also known as Lucifer, which is the light. What if the light is the wrong place to follow? You ever see Poltergeist? Stay away from the light. Ever see the movie The Matrix? When it's all made of light and he walks through that door and finds out it's just a computer-generated simulation? And it wasn't what they thought it was? Belief is very dangerous because a lot of people will base their livelihoods on that belief. And if anyone challenges that belief, what do? They don't say, let me think about that constructively. I'm going to take that person's criticisms or their different point of view. I'm going to research it and evaluate the opinion based on what I learn. Or do you think they automatically dismiss it because it goes against their own belief system that they've been programmed since day one? Because I doubt any of you have met the real God or any God. And how many of you, if all of a sudden a bearded white man came from the sky and came down to you and commanded you to commit murder, you would do it without question? Who pays the price? The person who manipulated you? Or your choice to not question what you have been told? Maybe that's the ultimate test. Because, like I said, if you believe in the Bible, one of the things in the Bible is in the 10 Commandments that says, "Thou shalt not kill." So if all of a sudden an image comes down from the sky, enters into your house magically, and says, "I am the one true God, I need you to prove your loyalty to me by getting down on your knees and then killing your firstborn child," how many people would do it? How many people would do it without a thought? How many people would be happy to do it, thinking that they're appeasing the one true God? Now, that God didn't force you to do it, didn't make you do it, just planted a seed. Your free will made the choice to do it beyond question. So what if that was not the one true God and it was a deceiver? Now you've just committed the one biggest sin through your own free will. And you could sit there and say, "Well, I was tricked," or "I didn't know," or "I thought it was real." Do you think that will help you? When you get pulled over by a cop for going through a red light, and you use the excuse, "Well, I didn't know," will that stop you from getting a ticket? Most of the time. Most likely, you'll still get that ticket. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. But notice through symbolism that still exists to this day, people are still not only manipulated, but when people like me and others will basically talk about logic and common sense and put things in a different light, people like me will be ignored, attacked, insulted, and that just keeps the agenda rolling. So whether there truly are gods or not, I don't know. I've never met one, at least I don't remember I have. But the word God is like the word love. It is so easily manipulated, and people just assume because they're told by somebody they think they trust, Even though time and time again, throughout history, governments have murdered their own people, stolen from their own people, controlled their own people, they seem to think, well, that can't happen now. The true definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And yet, for millennia, we, the people, have chosen to give our power over to other authoritarian people and governments to take control over us because they're there to quote-unquote protect us, and yet we're still impoverished, we're still enslaved, just a different form of enslavement, we're still lied to, we're still mistreated, we're still mostly poor, while the very few at the top who are there to supposedly save us all are swimming in your money, in your power, your energy. So if you want to get out of the trap, you first have to realize you're in a trap. Otherwise, you just rinse, lather, and repeat. Rinse, lather, and repeat over and over again. People are being manipulated in so many different ways, and they choose to not believe it and then wonder why things don't get better. Like I've said before, when it comes to governments throughout history, you'd think after thousands of years of practice they would have had it closer to perfection right now. But look how divided the world is. Look how much hatred is out there. How many people are spreading information that they were told from somebody that will manipulate you for your money or for your health or for your loyalty, thanking them for the few scraps they throw at your feet. And then the whole religious thing, how they can easily manipulate the word God into you making an assumption that the God they're referring to is the God you believe in or wish it to be. And you use your own free will as an excuse. You have to think better. You have to think for yourself. You have to see the image for what it truly is. You ever hear the expression, I once was blind, but now I see? They're not talking about a person that lost their sight and all of a sudden now can see the trees before them. They're talking about the things that are right smack in front of you that you didn't pay attention to until one day you saw it for what it really was. And like Dorothy had experienced, she had the power to go home all along. She didn't earn that power at the end. She had it. She just didn't believe that she did. So if you worship the almighty dollar, that's your choice. If you think all of those dollars are going to create a happy life, then let me ask you, why is the highest suicide rate from the top 1% of the wealthiest people? It's worshiping the false god. And even the Bible, if you read it, it's full of incest, full of murder, filled with evil. That doesn't sound like an all-forgiving, all-loving God to me. Sounds like that was written by somebody to manipulate you into doing the wrong thing through your own free will. So you can choose to ignore this. You can choose to pretend it didn't exist. You can choose to not believe it and say, I'll believe whatever I want. That's fine. That's your choice. But remember, for every action or inaction, there is an equal and opposite reaction. There is a response. There is a consequence. And that's why one of the reasons why I love the fact that I even love comic books, and I'll mention the story before I go, and one of the reasons why I loved Spider-Man so much is he realized real quick, through his inactive choice, that there are consequences. And I'll leave this story for people who may not know the true reason why I like Spider-Man and why this is relevant here. Because if you actually ever read the comics, now I'm not basing it on the movies because the movies made it a little different, but I'm going to base it on the true origin of Spider-Man and show you why it's relevant. Peter Parker, when he first gets his powers, he was a nerdy little kid that was a nobody, had hardly any friends, and all of a sudden was given this power that he didn't know what to do with. And he was living with his Aunt May and Uncle Ben. And they were poor, they were struggling. And he felt bad that he couldn't contribute, albeit he was still a teenager. So when he got these powers for the first time and realized he was incredibly strong and can do things like crawl on walls, he didn't know what to do with it. So at first, he decided to try and find a job and make money off of this newfound power. And he comes across an article that says you'll get paid, I don't remember the price, but let's assume it's $500 to compete and win in a wrestling match against a professional wrestler. And he thought, wow, I can do that. I'll make some money. I'll help my Aunt May and Uncle Ben make $500 easy, and I just won't tell anybody I have this secret power. So he goes to this wrestling match. He defeats the wrestler. And then when it's over, he goes in the back with the manager, expecting to get $500. And the manager, I don't remember the amount because, again, it's irrelevant, but the manager, let's say, gives him 25 of it and says, be on your way. And Peter Parker, all mad, says, well, what do you mean? The flyer says 500. And again, I'm just paraphrasing at this point. But then the manager basically says, well, be lucky you even got the $25. Be on your way. So Peter Parker storms out, really upset about this, mad at this manager. How dare you screw me over? I wanted that 500. I was counting on that 500. You didn't give it to me. So he starts walking out. As he's walking out, another person walks in who ends up being a robber who robs that manager at gunpoint, steals all his money, and starts running away towards the very elevator that Peter Parker was about to enter. And as the robber is running away and passes Peter, the manager screams out, stop that guy, he just robbed me. But Peter Parker, being mad at that manager, thinking, well, he got what he deserved, he let that robber go. And he felt really good about his choice. He felt very smug and saying, oh, look, you got what you deserve. You cheated me. I'm not going to stop somebody who cheated you. Now you know how I feel. And he felt very good at that moment. But what ends up ultimately happening is the manager calls the police. So the police are on a hunt for this robber. So the robber finds the first house that he could find to hide from the cops. And it ends up being Aunt May and Uncle Ben's house, Peter Parker's uncle and aunt, where Ben Parker gets murdered. And Peter Parker ends up finding out that the person who murdered his Uncle Ben was the very person that he let slip by because he was angry at the manager for cheating him. So his inaction is what inspired Peter Parker to become a superhero, thus giving the phrase, with great power comes great responsibility, because change does not always occur by what you do. Sometimes change occurs by what you choose not to do, thinking, I don't want to be involved. That's why so many people gravitate towards that character, because his inactions led to the death of his uncle, which he ended up ultimately feeling incredible burdens over. Because if he would have stopped that burglar would have never went to his house, would have never murdered his Uncle Ben. With great power comes great responsibility. And you notice the people that are in constant power, whether it is religious, whether it is media, whether it is education, whether it's governments, they all display lots of power and influence over you, and they are not being very responsible with it. But for some reason, because we get a few scraps from their table of plenty, we seem to continually allow them to continue to manipulate us, keep us down, keep us poor, making you believe their stories, because you can make any story sound good. I'm sure somebody can come up with a reason why eating dog poop would be a very good thing. And I'm sure somebody out there would be convinced. Because if you get a person with a college degree with a nice fancy suit and tie and all of a sudden tells you there was some secret ingredient that they just discovered in a research lab that dog poop is the most nutritious thing actually on the planet and you should really eat it, there would be people without question would start grabbing it and eating it like it's the best food ever. There's an old saying that says, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Well, throughout history, especially now, we're learning that the media lies to us constantly. That the education departments lie to us constantly. that the Food and Drug Administration and what they put in the food and what they put in the medicines lie to us constantly, that governments lie to us constantly, that corporations lie to us constantly, banks lie to us constantly, and yet we keep using them over and over and over again because it's easier. Well, if a supposed God comes down and commands you to commit sin, the very sin that you're told not to do, and you just do it, I'm sure that's a lot easier than questioning that person, because maybe they might get mad at you. Maybe they might strike you down. But maybe then you died for the right reasons. It's called sacrifice. It's called being a martyr. Most people would never do that. If you want the world to change, you got to start making a change. If you want the world to change and you sit there waiting for somebody else to do or say what you have to give and offer, well, don't be surprised that you'll be sitting there for your whole life waiting for something that will never happen because you haven't initiated it. And I had to learn that lesson by wanting to almost quit this, because it's very frustrating what YouTube does. But as much as YouTube will silence me, as you can see, there are at least some people that are getting the message, which means they cannot stop you completely unless you choose to shut yourself down, which is something I almost did. So I don't want this video to be too long, because one of the things I've come to an understanding is if you make a video too long, most people will never read it. It is your job, if you feel the information I have given you is helpful and beneficial and is true and resonates with you, your job is to share this information. Your job is to spread this information. Your job is to speak this information. And hopefully you'll start to live some of the things that I talk about and see things without just accepting them, to question them, to verify things, to see the deeper level, to see the symbol if it goes opposite of what is being stated. So the next time one of the politicians says, "God bless you" and "God bless America," think to yourself, which God are they referring to? Don't just assume that the God you believe or hope it to be is the one that they believe in, because by their deeds you shall know them. They tell you lots of good things. How many of them do they act upon and prove? But we're hopeful, and we'll wait forever, and you wonder why things don't change. The world will never change if all you do is thumb up a video or write in a comment, "Good job," and you don't do your part for fear of being judged, attacked, or whatever. And that's why I never wanted to really stop. I was never afraid of being rubbed out and murdered or anything, because let's put it this way, if I got murdered for doing the right thing, I'm okay with that, but they can't touch us the way you think they can. But they'll make you believe they can, and if you want to believe that, you can create your own situation. Why do that? So think a little deeper. Question things. Don't just assume that because somebody in a suit and tie told you, they researched it, that they are being truthful. Or at the very least, not verifying it to make sure they didn't make a mistake. Because how many things have we been told are ending up being lies? Things that people were made fun of. When I first started talking about quote-unquote fake news back in 2012, I was attacked and laughed at constantly. But now people see it. You got to think deeper if you want change. But always remember, like Peter Parker found out the hard way, if you choose to do nothing or choose to do the wrong thing because it's easier, you never know if that situation might not come back and bite you in the rear end. Regret is not something that we all should want to do by doing nothing. If you try something and fail, or you try something and it backfires, or if you try something and it just doesn't work, you can live with that. But if you didn't do something out of fear, and it created a harsh life or a bad life or ended your life, that was your choice. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. I wasn't expecting to make another video, but you know what? If I feel passionate enough to speak about something, I'm going to continue it whether YouTube likes it or not. Because they try and silence things, and out of 43,000 subscribers, 46 people are watching, but at least 46 are watching, because you never know. One of these 46 might be the one that changes the world. And if it was inspired through my video, then I'm darn sure glad I made it. So you take this information with a grain of salt, you dismiss it, you just view it as entertainment, or you see it as something that could change your life's perspective. That's up to you. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.